Hello, and this is just a short video about Haydn, the celebrity. I've always thought how important it is that when we're performing music that, of course, we're playing all the notes and we're trying to do it in a stylistic way, but actually to know a little bit about what the first performance was like, what Haydn was up to, what he ate for his dinner, who he liked to go and have a drink with. I think that's a really important part of music making, to know the context of a performance and of a piece of music and why it was written and how it was written and who for. So this video is really just a brief insight. I've been pulled together some resources that I've been reading about, particularly some of Haydn's notebooks, some of his diaries from the time when he was in London, that I think give a really interesting insight into what he thought of the place and what he got up to. And of course, we're left with these 12 amazing symphonies, the London Symphonies, that caused this massive acclaim, and as the title of the video, made him a real celebrity. I mean, you're already well known, but a real loved composer in 18th century England. He was really the kind of the Hollywood glamour that came with him, because there'd been this real determination to get him to come over to England for so long. 10 years before he was even arriving in the country, when he first arrived in the 1790s, 10 years before that, there were newspaper articles. One described it as the Shakespeare of musical composition is hourly expected, 10 years before he came. Or this wonderful man who is the Shakespeare of music and the triumph of the age in which we live, is doomed to reside in the court of a miserable German prince. Would it not be an achievement equal to a pilgrimage for some aspiring youths to rescue him from his fortune and transplant him here to Great Britain? Well, luck was on their side, I suppose, because the miserable German prince, Prince Nicholas the Esterházys, who had this amazing musical establishment, it started to go to pot a little bit, because when Nicholas died and his new boss, the son Anton, took over, Haydn wasn't really required as much. He wasn't as big a fan of music, so he was kind of placed on furlough, for want of a better word, given a retainer, but importantly allowed more freedom, which he went back to Vienna, put himself on the market, and Salomon, the great man who brought Haydn to London, jumped in, and so that's what brings Haydn to London. Of course, money is definitely worth mentioning at this point. For the first 6 symphonies, he was paid £300, which equates to about £25,000 today. So I think the stat was that he earned more in that time than he did across the whole year or a number of years whilst working for the prince. What I thought was really interesting is these notebook mentions of Haydn's time in London, just to set the scene. He says, "My arrival caused a great sensation throughout the whole city, and I went the round of all the newspapers for 3 successive days. Everyone wants to know me. I had to dine out 6 times up to now, and if I wanted, I could dine out every day." And at the start of the first concert, he says, "I was conducted on the arm of an entrepreneur up the centre of the hall to the front of the orchestra amid universal applause, and there I was stared at and greeted by a great number of English compliments. I was assured that such honours had not been conferred on anyone for 50 years. And this is only in London. It's worth pointing out, of course, that Haydn would take trips around England. He had given an honorary doctorate at Oxford, I think, as well. So was really seen as this amazing person. Perhaps it was all that suspense that had been built up with newspapers wanting him over here after 10 years before he actually came. So going back to some of Haydn's notebooks, some other intriguing insights, even if they're a little bit kind of mundane at times, I think this is worth talking about. He said about the City of London that it keeps 4,000 carts for cleaning, and 2,000 of these work every day. And then a very interesting insight on food. In the month of January 1792, a roasting chicken cost 7 shillings, a turkey 9 shillings, and a dozen larks 1 crown. And a duck, if it is plucked, cost 5 shillings. Then this is an intriguing one as well. Noyen, a drink squeezed from nutmeg, rum and sugar, comes from Martinique in the West Indies. So interesting to see all those, the melting pot of lots of different cultures already coming together at the end of the 18th century. going on to this first performance, then it's, I think, really important again in the way we approach a first performance, and there might be more musical videos that follow. This is, I suppose, is a more social context. Many of you'll know my keenness to make classical music a bit more chilled out and relaxed, and I think it's that thing of audiences clapping and what have you, and that bizarre way of sitting there quietly, and this is the quote. This is the quote that proves, obviously, that wasn't the case. This is from a newspaper report at the time of the first performance, or of the first performances of the symphonies in that first time that he was in London. Passages, this is what we hear. Passages often occur which render it impossible to listen to them without becoming excited. We are altogether carried away by admiration and forced to applaud with hand and mouth. This is especially the case with Frenchmen, of which we have so many here, that all public places are filled with them. You know that they have great sensibility, and cannot restrain their transports, so that in the midst of the finest passages in soft adagios, they clap their hands in loud applause. In every symphony of Haydn, the adagio or andante is sure to be repeated each time, after the most vehement encores. So it goes back to that thing that, again, I've talked about before in concerts, about how it was this really social statement of going to watch a concert. You didn't just turn up and sit there and watch it. You went to play card games, and you went to have drinks, and worse things probably as well. And yeah, it was a real statement to go. And of course, there's that amusing thing that Haydn got a little bit annoyed that the usual thing was to arrive after the first half. So that's when Haydn used to make the organisers put his new symphony in the second half, so that people would actually be there to watch it. Interesting, of course, to talk about the place where they were performed, these symphonies, in the Hanover Square Rooms, just down the road, of course, from Brook Street, where Handel had been living earlier on in the 18th century, and performed in St George's Hanover Square, the church. The famous Hanover Square Rooms were opened in 1775 by Johann Christian Bach, and went on all the way up until 1874, which I didn't know, and welcomed everyone, including Liszt and Mendelssohn, and of course Haydn as well. So, you know, an amazing concert venue for where these symphonies were first performed. A little bit about the orchestra, which is again something I'd not known about before. With Haydn working at the court in Austria, he didn't have huge forces to work with. So when he came to London, he had an orchestra of 40, which is great, obviously. 16 violins, 4 violas, 3 cellos, and 4 double basses. Obviously complemented there by the wind and brass. And the orchestra was led by Salomon, the man who brought Haydn over, playing on a Stradivarius instrument that had previously belonged to Corelli, apparently, and Haydn conducted from the pianoforte. So yeah, I'm sure an amazing moment for those musicians to be playing with Haydn, and in fact, those musicians moving forward, I guess, were able to then tell people about how to play Haydn, having been conducted by the great man himself. So that's just an insight, I think, into Haydn's, it's a brief insight into Haydn's time in London, but I think it's important, that we kind of get an idea of what was going on, and he was treated as a celebrity by all the people who came to the concerts, but obviously on top of that, he had a lot of royal interest, going to balls that were put on for the Queen's birthday and welcomed as the great celebrity. He had a lot of love interest as well, and of course you can delve into more detail of all the letters that were being written to him and that he was writing back. But of course this great amount of excitement had been built up, and we're left with these 12, as I said at the start, I think quite underrated symphonies, really, and should be I think encouraged more as part of the repertoire. And of course, Haydn at this point was in his 50s, 60s, so he wasn't here, as a youthful kind of new person on the block. He was, towards the latter ends of his career, but still being able to write with so much invention and things, and doing new things that had never been seen before, and particularly in England. So maybe some more videos will come that are more musically based, and we'll see. But I think hopefully this is just a little bit of an insight, and do feel free to have more of a read. I think Haydn's notebooks are a really interesting social view on what was going on. Thanks for watching.